And I'm Brianna Marr, and I'm the Vice President.
We are excited to share this evening with you all. Tonight, you are among a special group of successful professionals, alumni, and an impressive team of industry leaders who will be speaking this evening. Please take advantage of tonight as an opportunity to listen, learn, and make new connections.
Without further ado, we would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Lisa Tanzer, the president of Life is Good. Please join us in welcoming her.
There we go. Can you guys hear me okay? Good volume? Awesome. Thank you for having me. And to thank my cousin Rhonda Gilbert right there for inviting me to the conference. A lot of positive feedback from her students about what an awesome teacher she is, so that was nice. But it's always nice to get back onto a college campus and get to be with you guys. I'm going to share a little bit about my background career, how I got to this awesome job that I love, and then a little bit more about the company so you can learn about the journey and sort of how the guys got started and where we got to today. So I work for Life is Good. If you don't know Life is Good, we are a $100 million lifestyle apparel brand, primarily shirts, hats, bags. So do a lot of licensed products. So we're making bikes now, and tailgate equipment, chairs. I feel like this mic's, is this better? Okay. And the like. In the company, I'll tell you a little bit about the background of it, but we are headquartered in Boston. We also have an office in Princeton, New Hampshire, so we are about 170 people overall. Sometimes when I talk to people who are in college, I try to think about what's been the most important thing for me sort of throughout my career, and I feel like that's really been the power of relationships. And making sure that you have good relationships with the people who you grew up with your friends, with people who you've worked with, because you're going to be surprised how often people come back around into your life in ways that you might not expect. And they're going to remember a lot about you and how hard you work, but also a lot about the type of person that you are. So I personally haven't sent a resume or interviewed for a job in over 20 years. Because it's all been through people who I know or people who know people who I know, and it's a lot easier to get a job done or make a deal with somebody if you already have a relationship. So speaking of relationships, this is a picture from 1985. If you couldn't tell from the hairstyles and outfits, that's me in the middle. These are my two guy friends, Andy and Mark, and my very good friend, Stephen Gross. I'll explain this picture in a little while, but you will realize that I did not have my arm around Stephen Gross because he chose to date my prettier, older sister, Lori, and we were good friends and it made me mad. But anyways, we're sort of over that by now. But when we graduated, this is our senior year in high school, when we graduated from college, Stephen started a nonprofit called Project Joy. And this nonprofit, he was going to go work with kids who were homeless, to do play therapy, to teach them about self-esteem and feeling good about themselves. And he found out that legally he needed to have a board of directors. And so he called me up and he's like, Tanzer, can you be on my board of directors? Like, you're my only friend with a real job. You'll look okay on a piece of paper. So I joined his board of directors in 1990. And we didn't have any money, so what we did was we would throw parties around Boston, beer parties, like you'd give us $10, I'd give Stephen like $300 or $400. That's how we would fund the early days of Project Joy. But Project Joy started to grow, that's Stephen in the middle there, over the years, and we got a little bit of funding. So Stephen and I started to work together. I went from college to what's now PricewaterhouseCoopers to do management consulting. That's when I joined up with Stephen. Then I went to business school, and I knew I wanted to do consumer marketing, and I went to work for Gillette, which at the time for me was like I had to have that job at Gillette because it was one of like the bigger consumer products companies in Boston. And I got to Gillette, and I was marketing deodorants and hair care products, and I'm not knocking all of that. It was actually a really great job, but I wasn't that passionate about what to call the deodorant or what the couponing at the time was going to look like. And I learned something early on that we talk about a lot at Life is Good, which is like it's more important to really figure out what you love to do, and then you'll figure out how to be good at it. And I love the work that I was doing with Stephen in Project Joy. And so I said, okay, if I can market something that makes me feel good, brings smiles to people, that might be the good career. So I applied for a job at Hasbro, which is, I'm not comparing Hasbro making toys to anything of the depth of Project Joy, but to me it just felt good to do something that was going to help little kids. So I went to work at Hasbro. I had a really awesome claim to fame. At Hasbro, I worked on, when you start at Hasbro, you get like the littlest brands that nobody wants. So I had Lincoln Logs, and you guys don't even know what Lincoln Logs are. I had a couple people who are our age might know what Lincoln Logs are. I had Lincoln Logs, Tinker Toys, Wood Puzzles, and Mr. Potato Head. And so we also had the Star Wars license, so I got to make like Mr. Potato Head meets Darth Vader to make Darth Vader. Wow, that's adding a lot of value to society, but it was a lot of fun. And so while Stephen and I were doing that, you know, the Project Joy, and I was working, a couple other guys we went to high school with, so we're all from Meetup. We went to high school with, we're trying to do what they love to do, and that honestly was to not get a job. This is Bert and John Jacobs, probably early 90s, and they didn't want to get a job, so they decided they're artists, they wanted to make t-shirts. And this is a t-shirt about something about being Irish and a leprechaun. I actually never looked at the picture that closely until now. And so they went on a road trip. They got a van, they went on a road trip, they would go to college campuses, they would go to fairs, and they would try to sell these t-shirts out of their van. And they had this van, they called it Enterprise, and they just took off. But for maybe 5 years, I mean, I don't know, like they were trying to have a business. I think they were also trying to, you know, stay in their college days. For 5 years, they drove up and down. They did not have any success. They were really about to give up. Like they were barely scraping by. They had $78 left, and they're like, you know what? We might have to get a real job. We tried. We don't know what to do now because we've been out of college 5 years and we don't have a job. And on one of these conversations, they were talking about the news, and this was the early 90s, and how, why is the news so negative? Everything you hear is about something, you know, negative. And think about this was before the internet, you know, and before you had news all the time, but just the general news, every magazine cover was about something negative. And so why don't we try to come up with t-shirts that have a positive vibe and a positive feeling? So what they would do after these road trips is they would come back and sketch, and they would put up these pictures all around their apartment. They would throw keg parties, and people would write on the pictures and decide what they said they liked and didn't like. And so they drew this guy, Jake, and they wrote the words, "Life is good," and they got a lot of Post-it notes from their probably drunk friends who said, hey, this guy looks fun, he looks cool, you know, he kind of makes me feel good. And they decided that, you know, that's good. And they looked back and said, reminds us of our mom, and that's their mom, Joan. And when Bert and John grew up, they had the same share of dysfunction in their household, and probably all of us in this room have some of it. They didn't have a lot of money, the dad had a lot of issues, and Joan would always want to change the conversation. So she would always say, tell me something good that happened today at every meal, to try to get the kids somewhat distracted from the chaos that was going on. Like, hey, this Life is Good shirt with this guy Jake makes us kind of remember our mom. Let's go try to sell him. So they went out to Harvard Square, and the early Jake Life is Good shirt there, and all of a sudden people started buying their shirts. They were in Harvard Square, they sold out 48 shirts in an hour. And they went back and made more, and the next day they sold 72 shirts in an hour. And what they realized is that it was people from all walks of life that were, you know, that had the appeal to the words life is good. And whether you were young or old or had money or you didn't have money, the shirt made a lot of people smile, and they realized, hey, maybe we're onto something here with this. And it started off, this is one of the early shirts, with Jake doing things that people love to do. So simple pleasures. You know, it was Jake riding a bike, Jake eating ice cream, Jake going to the beach, and they would sell to like mostly beach locations and resort areas. And the business started to grow. So the previous 5 years of this chart would be like here. They made absolutely no money. And then once they started with Life is Good, in 5 years it grew to about a $3 million business, and they were pretty happy with that. But something happened in those 5 years that surprised them quite a bit. And they started to get letters, things that they didn't ask for or look for, of people facing adversity. And this is these two brothers sent this picture. One was born without a leg and one was born blind. And they wrote a letter to Bert and John saying, hey, we're brothers. you know, just like your brothers, we love our brothers. We were born with special challenges, but we celebrate every day just the fact that we're brothers. And they're like, wow, young kids are responding to life is good. We clearly have challenges, but have a really great outlook. And then they would see something again, this is in the 90s, they saw this picture in the Boston Globe of this girl, her name's Lindsay Beggin, facing terminal cancer, who's wearing a Life is Good shirt in the newspaper. They're like, wow, we gotta meet this girl. This young girl that's like suffering, like, you know, she's been told she's terminal and she's still wearing Life is Good. The letters kept coming and coming, and they really didn't know what to do with them. They called them fuel, and they would just keep them in their drawer, you know, in their pockets, and try to say, wow, we're doing something probably a lot deeper than selling shirts that celebrate ice cream and surfing and the like. This kept happening. This is Nancy Sir and her daughter, Brianna, and her husband, who was killed in 9/11. He was the first firefighter killed. He was one of the first responders, and when he got to the scene of the Twin Towers, a body fell on him from somebody who was jumping from the building. And because he was injured at that time, his other fellow firefighters in his group did not go into the building. So they actually lived because he died. He was the first one to die. And she recognized that they all would have passed away anyways. And she wrote Life is Good, a letter saying how grateful she was that he was going to go, that he did what he did, and that she wanted every year at Christmas to give shirts that say Life is Good to, you know, all of her friends and family as a memory of him, because that was his motto in life. He always said, hey, life is good. And the letters just came, and it changed the mission of the company, you know, from simple pleasures to really being about spreading the power of optimism. So while we're our t-shirt and hat company, we really have a mission base, which is to make people understand that life can be good, to help people find optimism within themselves, and primarily not through us telling anyone that that's what they should do, but by sharing stories from people who have overcome adversity and have used optimism to do so. The company also really realized that a lot of these came from children, and started to donate 10% of its profits to help kids. Now, because we all knew each other from high school, we were lucky because Bert and John were giving 10% of a lot of their 10%, not all of it, to us at Project Joy. So we were the beneficiaries of Project Joy of Life is Good way back in the early days. In around 2000 and, I always forget what it is, I should remember this, 2012 or so, they decided that we don't want to give out checks anymore. Like, they were writing Project Joy a check, they were writing different kids' foundations a check. We want to do the work ourselves. So our Project Joy, now fast forward, this is a lot of years later, we started Project Joy in 1990, became the Life is Good Kids Foundation. And we're all in the same building. We work together legally, we're two separate entities, but Life is Good donates 10%, but we have the foundation work and the work of, what we do is we train child care providers who are working with kids facing poverty, violence, and illness, so they can find, kind of similar to the work we started with of all, self-esteem within themselves. Now the demand is so great, we've trained over 15,000 child care providers that Life is Good can't actually fund all the work, so we raise money from a lot of other individuals and organizations as well. But Stephen and I now are back in the office together every day. He runs the foundation, and I get to run the for-profit side. So 3 years ago, I took the job at Life is Good on the for-profit side, became the president a couple years ago. I honestly have no idea why I didn't work there before, and I took all these other jobs. It was kind of silly on my behalf, but this is what we get to do, and now the sales of Life is Good are up to $100 million. What we found is that the news hasn't changed that much. In fact, it might be worse, but that what we focus on grows, and we really have found that we are getting a vast community of people who are using optimism and spreading optimism through Life is Good and through sharing their stories. So in 2015, Bert and John wrote a book. It's a good book, it's an easy read, it has a lot of pictures if anyone's interested, but it's really about their journey, but also about a lot of these inspiring people who have met, and a little bit about our values. We call these our superpowers, so we celebrate optimism and what it can grow out there in the world, things such as gratitude, love, simplicity, openness, and the like. So when I started at Life is Good in 2015, I worked with those guys to develop a tour. It was a Life is Good tour. We went cross country for 8 weeks. It was fun most of the time. But part of it was raising money. We raised $1 million to help kids, our foundation and others. And we also went in search of all the people who wrote those early letters. And we found out where they lived and wanted to meet them and interview them, especially the kids who were so optimistic early on. So we met Nick and Alex, who are quite adorable, I must say, and have a great sense of humor and have made a great life for themselves. We met Lindsay Beggin, who survived cancer, who's an amazing 27-year-old, and her sort of story of optimism. So we got to spend a lot of time, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences to go meet these people, meet some of our other, we get so much user-generated content and people sending us pictures of them wearing Life is Good, and it's the same as the early days. Young people, old people, people from all over the world who are facing different things, who embrace the philosophy. We've also been fortunate because a lot of celebrities like Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood and Aly Raisman and Malcolm Mitchell from the Patriots, and I'm not saying that to be a name dropper, what I'm saying is it's good business when you're doing something good, and people bigger than you want to be part of your movement because they can bring new folks to you. And on our social media, we have 2.8 million or so Facebook fans. Let's just say it's small compared to a big brand like an Under Armour or Nike, but in a given week, we will get 10 to 20 times the engagement, like, shares, and comments off of our Facebook because we're not selling things, we're just creating conversations. And the conversations are from our community. They're not about us. So this was just a post that the marketing team pulled from a few days ago. The great thing about tides is that they turn. This is how Megan took her mother's challenging diagnosis and turned it into hope. This woman wrote us a letter about how she's trying to be positive through her mother's cancer diagnosis. And then all of our community starts to write back about how they're handling or how they're working with people in their family who might be sick. So thank you for sharing the idea of finding cancer. It's great. This is the middle one. In March 2016, my oldest brother was diagnosed. He's beating the odds. People just start to share their inspiration and supporting each other. We just got this post that this guy posted to us, and he said, "This was me in 2010 in a homeless shelter. Since then, I've gone on to college, moved to Alaska, and now I'm an Alaskan commercial fisherman living my dreams." He took the picture when he was homeless and wore Life is Good to try to get him through. And then you can imagine all the people who want to offer him support or find support within that. This was last week, April 4th. Someone picked this up in the newspaper of a really young, inspiring guy who's fighting ALS, and he was wearing, we didn't know, Life is Good while he's in the hospital. And so when you feel like you're doing good work and putting good out there, it also does make for good business. Our real goal is to inspire people, but also to say if you start at the younger generations, then that will, that might help the world a little bit more. And you can get people when they're younger through the foundation, but also through the work that we do through our brand marketing. So this year we just finished our 3rd annual t-shirt contest for kids. We get 8,000 entries. We thought they'd be digital, so it'd be easy to sort them, but no, they come in like snail mail, like buckets and buckets of mail. We didn't know what to do about it the first year because kids take their art serious, right? But what we do is we sort it all to see what's important to kids. So that's where the interns came in a couple of years ago and started helping us, whether it's family or environment. And we do a contest and there's winners and all that stuff. But it's more market research to us to see what's important to kids today. And there's a lot about caring and giving. Friends make life good. Life is good with family. They talk about individuality. They talk about loving where they came from and their roots. About loving yourself, finding your own inner beauty. It's pretty deep. They could write all of our shirts for us. It would be great. Really beautiful art, right, about unity. And then of course you can do all this because you don't need to wear clothes, you just need to smile. So we get a lot of humor in there too. But we know if we start to work with kids when they're younger, that they will find optimism. So they're pretty incredible people, and I think what we've learned through meeting a lot of these people is a true sense of gratitude, and focusing on gratitude. And one of the Life is Good lessons is just changing one simple word in your vocabulary might change your whole perspective on something. So we like to change the word have to get to. And when you hear people say, I have to go to the supermarket, such a drag. Well, maybe you get to go to the supermarket because you have a car, you actually have access to food, and now you college kids don't think this, but the high school kids might say, I have to go to school today. You know, a lot of people don't have access to education, you know? And so when we go to a meeting, we say, we get to go to a meeting, and Nolina, who works with me every morning, gives me my get-to list instead of my to-do list. Even though it's 6 pages long, seeing get to at the top of it makes me feel a little bit better. So what we felt that, you know, is like, we get to do these things, and if you feel gratitude, you will recognize, and we do that, like, life is not easy, and life is definitely not perfect, and we don't believe that it is, but if you focus on the positive, then life can be good. Thanks, guys. Anyone have any questions about the company, about foundation? Don't be shy. Expecting a question, there we go.
First of all, thank you very much for sharing your stories and giving us all an opportunity to reflect on everything we have to be grateful for. Taking you to the business side, I'm curious about how the shops are associated with your store. Are they franchises?
The Life is Good stores, yeah.
Right, because that's where a lot of people get their first introduction to the smaller.
Sure. It's a different kind of model. So we don't own the stores, and they're not franchises. They're independent operators that might feel like a franchise model. Yeah, so an individual, if they want to have a Life is Good store and we think that they're a good operator, they have to carry 90% of the merchandise Life is Good, and it will allow them to use our assets and have other standards. So that's how we do it. It's a lot of resort town people, and sometimes people who are either retiring or looking for a second income. Anyone have another question?
So Life is Good is obviously a lifestyle brand. So how does communicating your values impact how people want to come to work for Life is Good?
A lot of people want to come to it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fun place to work. We work really hard to live those values in the superpower tree that we showed up. Keep in mind, it's work. So some people think because we have this casual office, we have a tap room, we have dogs, people don't dress up for work, but it's still work, you know, and we still have to get it done, but we try to do it in a way that lives up to the values. So to be compassionate to each other, to be authentic, to be open to ideas, and we work really hard on the culture. I mean, harder than I think in any other company that I've worked with is that we do a culture survey, we understand where people, what their needs are, what their concerns are, we work as a leadership team to try to adjust those. And so I think when people come into the company, they get that it's a special place, and it feels like a special place to work, because we try to take good care of people. And I always say that's good business too. Like if you have good people who are motivated and feel good, they're going to work a lot harder for a lot longer. So we do well with recruiting people to the company because of that. Two more questions? Anyone else? Yeah, good question. So up until the point when I came into marketing, and when I came into marketing, they were just thinking about Bert, who's one of the brothers, was the president and CEO. He was just kind of ready to say, you know what, maybe this has outgrown me, and I need somebody to run the business side. They're creative, so they're there every day. Bert works on all the t-shirt art. He oversees all of the artists, you know, and decides what goes into the line and what doesn't go to the line. So he's working hard every day. And John works more on the marketing side, kind of like creative director over marketing, or I say advising them. He does a lot of writing. He and I did all the videos together, that type of stuff. So they're there, they're engaged, and they're doing what they love to do. And thank goodness, because I draw a stick figure, you know, or direct all those artists, and I get to do the things maybe that I'm better suited for. But we work together. It's really like a team of 3. We're just all doing the parts of life. Yeah. Sure. The question is, what's the biggest challenges that we face in the business and how are we overcoming them? I think retail is one of the biggest challenges. I think we've all seen this year, all the stores closing, you know, big box stores closing. So our online business is growing like crazy. And our wholesale retail side of the business has been pretty flat. And we've been able to weather the storm, but we really want to grow. So we thought a lot about strategy. A lot of people, when they do retail, say, let's go sell to a big, let's go sell to, sell these places, what I say, Dick's Sporting Goods. That's great for us. But really what gets people into the brand is all those shops. You know, all those little shops that when you're on vacation, when you're in the national parks. And so we're growing in a non-traditional way that way. But, you know, those aren't big dollars. So it takes time.
Okay, that's all the time we have for
Awesome.
questions.
Thank you, guys.